Stranger Things 5 Volume 2 had some insane plot twists. From a whole new world to the shocking truth about Vecna, let's break it all down. Volume 2 finally flips the entire map on its head because the Upside Down isn't just a creepy reflection of Hawkins anymore. It gets revealed to be a wormhole, a bridge between the real world and a new place called the Abyss. Dustin pieces this together after finding Dr. Brenner's journal in the Upside Down version of Hawkins' lab, and the danger becomes obvious the moment that bridge starts to fail. Nancy shoots at the strange substance floating above the lab. It disrupts the stability of the space and the wall begins to break. That single moment makes the new reality clear. The Upside Down isn't the true homeworld of the monsters. It's the passageway, it's the bridge connecting Hawkins to something older and way more hostile. And if that bridge collapses the wrong way, it doesn't just close a gate. It turns into a lethal failure of the connection, holding everything together. Then the story makes the Abyss the real endgame. The Abyss gets presented as another dimension tied directly to Vecna, the Demogorgons, and the Mind Flayer. It's also the place the stage play calls Dimension X, and the show treats it like the source world the monsters originate from before crossing over. The layout becomes important too. The characters figure out that the Abyss is literally above the Upside Down, which is why one of the key finale ideas becomes to go back in and climb, instead of hunting for a portal the way they did before. It turns the endgame into a different kind of problem. If the Upside Down is the bridge, then the Abyss is the world sitting on top of it, pressing down, ready to crash through if Vecna gets what he wants. That's why the weirdest discovery in Hawkins' lab suddenly becomes the most important object in the whole season. Inside the Upside Down version of the lab, the group finds an orb of exotic matter floating above the site, treated as a single source of energy, keeping the wall stable. The way it gets explained makes it clear this isn't a throwaway science term. Exotic matter gets framed as the stabilizer, the thing that keeps the wormhole from collapsing under gravity and tearing itself apart. It's the keystone to keeping Hawkins safe, in a way. If it gets disturbed, the wall can break and the space becomes unstable. That's why the characters start thinking like engineers instead of just survivors. The plan isn't just to kill Vecna and hope everything stops. The plan has now evolved into destroying the stabilizer and ending the bridge for good, because as long as that bridge exists, there's always the potential for the worlds to collide. All of that throws the story straight into Henry Creel's origin, and Volume 2 drops one of its most important reveals by taking Max and Holly into a memory Henry is terrified of. In a Nevada cave or mine shaft, 8-year-old Henry crosses paths with a scientist, and their encounter turns violent fast. The man shoots Henry in the hand after panicking, trying to keep something safe, and Henry kills him with a stone as a result. The show lingers on the strange briefcase the scientist carried, but it never shows what Henry sees once he opens it. That choice is extremely careful and deliberate. It turns the briefcase into one of the biggest unanswered objects in the story, because it's sitting right at the moment Henry's life changes, and it's clearly being saved for the finale to pay off. Something there broke him for good, and it might be the key to stopping him. Whatever's in it, that briefcase is tied to a government project called the Nevada Experiment, and the story behind it pulls the timeline back even further. The Nevada Experiment was an attempt to stabilize and weaponize a phenomenon discovered years earlier, when the military used electromagnetic fields to make the USS Eldridge disappear. The ship briefly crossed into the Abyss before returning, and in that account there was only one survivor, Captain Brenner, the father of Dr. Martin Brenner. He came back physically altered and infested with the same kind of particles that later became central to the Mind Flayer story. That detail changes how Brenner's obsession comes across because it becomes inherited and deeply personal. You've got a son staring at what happened to his father, then deciding to recreate it, control it, and weaponize it. Volume 2 circles back to 1959, the year Henry is shown in the desert, and it suggests Brenner successfully contained a concentrated amount of those particles by that point, which explains the smoke coming from the briefcase. When Henry touches what's inside, it triggers a surge of energy, opens a micro rift, and pulls him into the abyss. The timeline given is that he's there for about 12 hours before the rift pulls him back. When Henry returns, he's changed. His blood is different, and that's tied to his powers beginning to manifest. The idea is that the Abyss doesn't just expose people to monsters, it alters them at a fundamental level, and that alteration becomes the blueprint Brenner later uses to create an entire generation of powered children. That sets up the control question hanging over Volume 3. One perspective is that Henry used his psychic abilities to manipulate the particles, shaping them and bending them to his will. Another concept flips it around and argues the particles were controlling Henry from the start, making him a puppet for something bigger and older. This is where the Mind Flayer becomes a central shadow again, because the story keeps hinting that Henry's power and Henry's corruption might not be fully separable. There's room for Henry being evil on his own, but the show keeps opening the possibility that the Mind Flayer was already there, already waiting, already shaping what Henry became after those 12 hours in the abyss. From there, the blood connection becomes dark, and it ties Brenner's whole program into Henry's transformation. Henry's altered blood becomes the basis for creating other gifted children. Under Brenner, Henry's blood gets transfused into multiple unborn babies, including 11, with her mother Terry Ives being part of MK Ultra testing. After Brenner's death, Dr. K restarts the program and tries to recreate the process. She experiments with Callie's blood, but it doesn't work the way Henry's did, and the attempt results in multiple mothers dying. That failure is why 11 becomes the target again. Dr. K wants 11's blood to create new superpowered soldiers, and the Cold War motive gets stated clearly, controlling monsters and using them as weapons against the Soviets. Will Byers becomes a huge piece of the endgame too, because Volume 2 clarifies what his powers are and what they cost. Will says he doesn't have powers in the same way 11 does, and that he's simply siphoning Vecna's. The explanation goes back to Season 1 when Will was captured in the Upside Down and fed a mysterious organic substance containing Mind Flayer particles. That exposure becomes the reason he can jack into the hive mind, but it also puts strict limits on him. Will can only access his powers when he's extremely close to the hive mind, which becomes important because if the bridge is destroyed, Will likely loses access to those abilities. So the final plan that saves the world might also erase the only reason that Will can fight back the way he can right now, returning him to being just another ordinary boy. There's also a darker layer to Will's connection that makes his story hit harder. Vecna explains that Will, night after night, jacked into the hive mind and took control of the vines in the Upside Down, building a vast network of tunnels under Hawkins without understanding what he was doing. That means Will helped create the routes the monsters later used to terrorize the town, and the guilt sits under his fear of being isolated. The finale isn't just a case of physical fights, it's emotional warfare too, and Vecna's entire style is taking the worst parts of someone's inner world and turning them into weapons. Will's guilt is exactly the kind of thing Vecna would sharpen into a blade. Then the Max and Holly storyline basically becomes a launch ramp into Volume 3. Volume 2 shows Max awake for real after being trapped inside Henry's mind space, which is what gave the impression that she was in a mysterious coma. Eventually, Max escapes by navigating memories with Holly until they reach the way out. Max returns to her body and wakes up in the hospital. Not long after, the danger follows, with Lucas, Mike, Robin, and Vicky being chased by demodogs, and Karen Wheeler stepping in to stop them in explosive fashion. Holly's situation, on the other hand, is way worse. Holly wakes up in Vecna's lair and has to pull a disgusting, life-sucking vine from her mouth. She runs, trying to find her way home, only to realize she isn't in the Upside Down at all. She's in the Abyss itself, the place the whole bridge has been connecting to this entire time. Holly almost gets out, crawling through a crack in the ground. And even though she fails to get home safe, it still matters because for a moment she travels across dimensions. As she falls, she screams for help and Nancy hears her. Dustin connects the dots and realizes what it means. The Abyss is directly above the Upside Down. That turns Volume 3 into a rescue mission with a specific direction. The group doesn't have to guess where Holly is anymore. Instead, they have to reach the height where the bridge will rupture upward into the abyss as the dimensions collide. Volume 2 also lays out the grand plan, and it's complicated because it has to hit several targets at once. The goal is to get back into the Upside Down, climb the radio tower at the Squawk radio station, and use the moment when the worlds are moving closer to cross into the abyss. One part involves Erica and Mr. Clark stealing a signal to open the gates, so a truck can ram through and force entry. The key moment is when the radio antenna in the Upside Down pierces into the abyss, because that creates the window where they can climb up and cross over. At the same time, 11 has to enter Vecna's mind and freeze the merge, at least temporarily, and the plan ties that to Vecna's lair being beneath Hawkins' lab in the Upside Down, where 11 can use a bath to jack in while Max helps her navigate what she knows of his mind. Once the merge is frozen, the mission becomes a rescue and a sabotage at the same time. The group needs to reach the abyss, pull the captured children away from Vecna, and get back out fast. Volume 2 ends by showing exactly how Vecna is using those kids, with Mr. Whatsit leading a creepy ceremony where the children hold hands, their necks crane back, and their eyes turn white as his plan begins. If just one kid like Will could build tunnels through the hive mind without knowing, then a dozen controlled children become a nightmare for our gang. Even if Vecna is defeated, the bridge still has to be destroyed, so the threat can't be rebuilt, and that means targeting the exotic matter holding the wormhole stable. Mike rigs a remote detonator using a record player so the explosion triggers when the record reaches a certain part of the song. There's also talk that the finale will include a massive needle drop of a song that has never been licensed for a movie or TV show before. Either way, the record's a core part of the mechanism, and the bomb is meant to destroy the exotic matter, collapse the bridge, and end the Upside Down as a passageway between worlds. Callie adds the ugliest pressure to that plan because she's thinking beyond Vecna and thinking about what comes after. Callie tries to convince Eleven that if they want to prevent anyone from using their blood ever again, they need to remove themselves from the world. One version of that sacrifice is staying behind when the exotic matter is destroyed, which would strand them in the vacuum between dimensions with no atmospheres set out. That tension gets left hanging at the end of Volume 2 because Eleven wants to stay in the real world with Mike, but Kaylee is thinking about the long-term consequences of letting the government keep access to the blood that creates these powers. All of this emotional weight lands right next to one of the biggest character moments of the season. In the final minutes of episode 7, Will comes out to the people closest to him, saying he's different, and he doesn't like girls the way they do. He admits he had a crush on someone who isn't gay, and he explains why he finally says it out loud now. Will has been terrified of a vision that Vecna planted in his head, where this secret causes him to be pushed away until he's alone. Joyce and the others answer that fear directly, promising that it will never happen, and their love and support become part of Will's readiness to fight. The moment isn't treated like a quiet side plot. It gets set up as something Vecna would exploit, and something Will can stop being afraid of by taking away its power through truth. By the end of Volume 2, everyone is finally in position. The gang reunites, breaks into the military compound, and heads back toward the Upside Down for the last push, while Vecna continues his ceremony with the captured kids. All we can do now is wait to see how the plan will go when the final volume drops next week. But in the meantime, there are plenty of theories out there. One big theory is that Volume 3 shows Henry being transported to the Abyss for the first time and coming face to face with the Mind Flayer, with the reveal that Henry was not fully steering the ship, because the Mind Flayer has been shaping him, manipulating him, and pushing him toward this endgame the whole time. Another theory is that the briefcase ties directly to the exotic matter, meaning the same substance that created or stabilized the bridge is the thing Henry touched first, and it's why collapsing the bridge now is going to be harder than it sounds, because it is connected to Henry's origin, not just the lab ceiling. From there, the finale seems lined up for one huge sequence where the team forces their way back in, climbs toward the Abyss through the Squawk Tower plan, and tries to pull Holly and the other captured kids out while Eleven battles Vecna in his mind long enough to freeze the merge, because if that merge finishes, Hawkins stops being the battlefield and becomes the doorway for Vecna's entire army. And hanging over all of it is the grim possibility the show keeps pointing at, that saving the world might require someone staying behind when the bridge collapses, because shutting down the passageway might not just be a win, but a sacrifice too. And whether we like it or not, Volume 2 leaves that choice staring straight at Eleven, Kali, and the people they love. So what do you think of Volume 2? Do you think the plan's gonna work in Volume 3, or is there a fatal flaw somewhere that will lead somebody to die? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to see more Stranger Things content and theories, click the video on screen now.